thanks again for joining us. Excited to talk with both Nate and Erin today. Thanks for joining us, guys, and coming to share really some of the stuff you guys have been working on with your research, your report. But before we really dive into some of the technical and that side of things, I'd love for you guys to take the chance to introduce yourselves and let everybody know a little bit about kind of your background and what you're doing. So maybe Nate, let's go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think we were talking a little bit before. Erin and I were planning to do a webinar on this topic, and so really appreciate the opportunity to jump on and leverage RCN's network to get the word out. But I hear there's a conference coming up, Matt. I'm surprised you haven't plugged the conference yet.
Oh, come on.
So a lot of this stuff Erin will actually be presenting at the conference. But just quick background: I spent my career in construction. I spent 10 years at Bechtel, working on big Bechtel projects all over the world. And ended up back in San Francisco in 2015, helped set up the Office of Innovation, and have since kind of segued that into a lot of consulting work with other large building contractors on the topic of emerging technologies like augmented reality. So excited to present the findings here today and appreciate the opportunity.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for the background. And, one thing that's nice is you find, and I feel the same, is that industry professionals are now starting to see, hey, we've gone through certain background and experience in jobs. We now have the power to do this research, to create these reports, to help educate other people, because, back in, 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't really anyone giving us all this information, and the technology is changing. So it's great to, have you guys doing some digging and some educating around this content. Appreciate that. Erin, would love an introduction for you.
Absolutely. And thanks again, Matt, for having us on. Really appreciate being able to connect with everybody. And thank you, audience out there, for tuning in. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some good nuggets on this topic today. So a little bit more about my background. I've been in the construction industry for a bit over a decade, but I started first as a project engineer intern out here in LA. So I'm based in Los Angeles, and the first project that I ever worked on was helping to renovate one of the buildings on my college campus at USC. So as a civil engineering student, I was learning the latest and greatest, and then in a very different experience out on the job site, it was essentially just tons of paper everywhere. I thought, hey, maybe there's a better way. We can use things like iPads and digital drawings and all sorts of cool technology to kind of make things better, faster, safer, all of the good positive things that come with innovating. So fast forward quite a few years, I was super passionate about construction tech and improving processes with tech. So that's really where I found myself, my niche. My last major role was as the National Director of Construction Solutions at Suffolk. Essentially, wanted to do more than just at one company. So at the start of this year, 2023 in January, started Erin Kahn Consulting, my own consultancy to help support startups and builders with connecting with technology and innovation better. And then one of the projects that came out of this new venture that I'm really grateful for is partnering with Nate and Placer Solutions to help drive some of this research so that we're delivering really high quality, insightful information to the construction community when it comes to technology and how to leverage it for operational excellence. So I'm really excited to dig in a little bit today.
That's awesome. Well, and I appreciate your background. And again, it's really cool to see both of you from your backgrounds in industry, in innovation roles, now find a passion for wanting to help more people. I resonate with that a lot because that's a similar, why RCN started. The whole goal was, look, so many of us, you guys in your role at your company, have had to do this research ourselves within a business and look at case studies and try to integrate technologies and create cultures around innovation. And there's challenges with it. And there's a lot of businesses that don't even have those divisions, that don't have the resources to do it themselves. And now I've started to say, hey, what if we create this community where we link together with consultants, we link together with people who have done this over the last 10 years, and we start creating, again, like a report that talks about a deep dive into technology, or come to the conference and share it in a presentation to hundreds of people who want to hear this, that are trying to learn, because there's a lot of businesses, even though some of these technologies from scanners and drones and and AR/VR. They've been around for quite a while, but how do we actually adopt them? What are the available platforms? What are the real use cases within a job site? So it's really exciting to see you guys take that leap and kind of do some of the a similar vision and passion. Really look forward to hearing some of your research, and I'll let you guys kind of roll into it and tell us a little bit about how you picked the topic and why you're working on these reports.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on a big one there, Matt. It's just like, I think Erin and I teaming up on this as the first research report out of Placer Solutions, I think was just very timely. Erin's experience at Suffolk had a lot to do with the innovation networks that she helped build around the business, which really kind of reaches deep into the organization to find individuals who are, conducive to using new technologies. My consulting work does very similar things and involves organizational change management, finding influencers in the field around technology who you can kind of lean on to get stuff done in terms of testing out new tech and understanding how to use technology in meaningful ways in the field. And so, I think what Erin and I are doing here is really addressing that missing middle, is what folks are starting to call it. But it's this idea that we've had a lot of talk about new cool technology for 10 years, but it's like, how does the rubber hit the road and we actually begin to implement it? Right.
Yep.
And so, excuse me. And so, these research reports are really positioned to identify and find those use cases and applications in the field and understand best practices from builders, from technology providers, because we've had 10 years of experience kind of kicking the tires on some of this stuff. And so it's not just shiny objects anymore. There's a lot of things we can figure out and do in the field with this tech. I think, we picked augmented reality and mixed reality for a reason as the first research report. And I think, going back to my Bechtel days in 2015, when the HoloLens hit the streets and Magic Leap came out, there was so much hype and excitement about it. And I want to say a lot of it kind of came crashing down in a pretty dramatic way over the course of the next several years, because the reality didn't quite meet the hype. And so the timing of this report, I think, is really perfect, because we're at a point now, and this is something that Erin and I will talk about during the presentation, but this is a technology that has so much potential in construction, because it is like the holy grail of like, how do you take the digital information in the back office and get it and apply it in the field? It has so much potential there. And there's so many lessons learned over the years that I feel like we're beginning to turn a corner. And so
you mean digital back on the job site instead of just printing sheets of paper that you try to correlate, Yeah, that's absolutely. It really is. The technology itself has progressed so much over the last 10 years. Now it's how do you implement, and what are the true use cases? It's a great topic. And like you said, I think there's a lot of those terms and technologies that they get hype at some point, and then that hype dies down. But then there still is that value for the people who dive in and really find the use case. It's not like just go buy, a headset off the shelf and you're ready to go. How do you actually develop it into a workflow and into projects, which goes to this idea of you guys doing this research and putting this time into it, is just figuring out how to implement it and where to start. Takes a lot of time, takes effort in putting that ecosystem together. So, you guys taking the time to build this, I think, is awesome.
I was just going to mention, we teed up with B&B. So for each report, we spotlight a couple of builders, B&B, one of them, Hensel Phelps. Then Erin, you want to talk a bit about the remainder of the...
I was just going to mention, so both builders who are excelling with using AR, MR, as well as the tech providers made up the content of this report. So it's quite a robust, stakeholders that we engage to really inform what's in the report. And then there's also probably a bunch of other logos that are not on here, but we did have a lot of participants through survey also provide some insights and feedback. So it's really exciting to see, for example, B&B and Hensel Phelps, they have featured case studies, what they're able to achieve. And it quite frankly inspires me. I've been in the context space for years and years and years. So I've seen a lot, but it was really, truly outstanding to see how they're implementing it. from what you said, Matt, like from a process perspective. So it's not just, you pull out this thing and try to get it to work. It's really integrated with the workflows to pack a punch to the value in the field, like that you're trying to get every day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And a lot of credit to B&B and Hensel Phelps. I mean, to your point earlier, Matt, as well, and what Erin touched on. I mean, these are the true believers. Like, these are the folks that over the course of the past 10 years have stuck with the technology and really worked through it to understand the value in it, to integrate it into their workflows, as Erin was mentioning. And even though it still has some flaws, and we'll talk about some of that in the course of this webinar, but despite those flaws, like able to see the value in it and drive that value for owners and for teams internally as well.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you guys can see my screen.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. So these are, so essentially, Erin and I talked a little bit about how we put these research reports together. We cast a very wide net. So we've surveyed and interviewed over 100 individuals for this report. Everything from field users to technology providers. And interestingly, it was a pretty clean split between technology providers and field users, which came together really well. Again, this is a technology that's been around for over a decade, and it's kind of turning a corner. And so at the end of it, Erin and I sat down and we were like, what were the big key themes that we got out of this? And really started thinking about these 7 areas in particular as real kind of, hey, if we can address these areas, or if, these are either bright spots with the technology or addressable areas that in the next several years, builders and technology providers can begin addressing. But these are kind of the key takeaways. And would encourage folks, encourage folks, go check out the report. Everything that we talk about here is covered in much more depth in the report, and a bunch of other stuff is in there as well. And I guarantee if you're in the space, you will get a ton of value out of it.
And just so they understand how many pages is the report?
It's a little over 40 pages.
40 pages. So it's not like download this 5, page thing that has some bullet points of technology. It's 40 pages. And that's not like just a pages of image. There's a lot of information in this report. So I know, everybody that's on live and watching this webinar, this is a summary. This is talking about the report. This is giving some of the insight, some open Q&A. But really, I think there will be additional value if your company is interested in these types of technologies to really look at getting the report. And yes, there's a cost to it because, it takes time and effort to build something like this and put this much research into it. But do go check that out.
So the first point here, we'll just kind of dive into it. Erin, do you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, I'll kick it off for sure. So I think as we neared the end of our research period with this, Apple came out with their announcement that the Vision Pro is coming onto market. So this was really exciting as we were, finishing up the research here. So in my opinion, I definitely think that the Vision Pro is a big step in the right direction, although there is still a little bit of a ways to go, maybe a lot of bit of a ways to go when it comes to hardware in particular. However, like when we think of Apple and we think about our iPhone or iPad, it's always very easy to use. It's something that is pretty natural to pick up and just get started with. There's a familiarity and a comfort level with these types of devices. And that is something that has been kind of missing, I would say, from the hardware piece in particular when it comes to AR and MR devices. So with anything that's making that a little bit better of an experience, especially for first-time user experience, that will help drive adoption. So I guess disclaimer, I haven't tried the Vision Pro myself quite yet, hopefully soon. But some of the things that I wish we could still have with the Vision Pro, I think it still is tethered. So finding hardware devices that are extremely lightweight, that have long battery life, that don't need to be plugged in and powered would be obviously a big plus out on the job site. So big step in the right direction. Still not quite there, but very promising with informing the design for future headsets and hardware devices.
I'm actually kind of curious. I haven't tried the Vision Pro yet, and I wonder if folks in the audience have any thumbs up in the chat for folks that have actually used the Vision Pro or any kind of thoughts here, because a lot of, Erin mentioned this kind of dropped right as the research report was nearing completion, and we didn't really have a chance to kind of kick the tires on it. But curious how much market penetration has gotten so far.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, if anybody wants to throw in a chat if they have used the Apple Vision Pro yet, feel free to do so. A lot of times in research, we are doing interviews, we're looking at technology, but we don't get the chance to go buy every single piece to try it ourselves. So feel free to share some information.
Yeah, it looks like, so quick monitor of the chat. So it looks like mostly HoloLens usage, which is also relating back to my experience. So I've used HoloLens 1, HoloLens 2, and then Trimble's XR10, which is basically putting the HoloLens with the hard hat. So yeah, it seems like we're pretty light on the Vision Pro experience.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing in our industry too, is that this is not one of the technologies that's already in every company, right? A lot of construction sites are starting to have a drone on them, and they're doing some level, but AR, VR is still, I feel, for our industry, pretty early in the adoption. A lot of people have maybe bought a device to like play with in their office, but they haven't gone deep into the actual implementation, meaning they're also not going out buying all the new devices yet because they don't really understand where to implement. So I would be surprised if very many people have touched it yet.
Yeah, a lot of potential here, I think, and on the developer side as well. I mean, I think everyone has these in their pockets, and software developers are pretty used to developing on these. And there's things like ARKit and SDKs, Vision OS SDKs that Apple has that'll make this a lot easier. So we're pretty bullish on that. And just I guess more broadly here, just very bullish on the technology outlook for AR applications in general. The big one is localization. So it's this idea of like, how do you actually fix the device in the job site environment? And the job site environment is tough because it's dynamic, right? And so one way of doing this is to slap a QR code on a column. I'm sure folks are familiar with this, to essentially localize it to that QR code. But then as you move away from it, there starts to be some drift. And, this is something that is solvable. And there's a couple of techniques that I think in the future are going to help resolve this. One is this idea of spatial detection. So rather than locking onto one column or one QR code, you're able to essentially locate yourself spatially within an environment. And you see this in some applications. One of the tech providers we interviewed for the report is doing it in like downtown environments. So with the Magic Leap headset on, they're able to look around and they can see based on where the skyscrapers are and the distance of those scrapers, like they can very, very accurately pinpoint their location. So that's one way of kind of addressing this challenge. The other one was we had a conversation with some folks from NVIDIA, and they have this Omniverse, and the technique is called, I'm going to bungle this, I think it's asynchronous pose estimation. So it's a really fancy way of saying if you're connected to the internet, there's some fancy math they can do to basically correct for the drift. Obviously, the big caveat there, connected to the internet, a lot of job sites don't have connectivity, or at least high speed connectivity. So there's some challenges here, I think, that are still in the job site environment. But I'm a techno optimist. I think we'll address these, and we talk about all of those technological challenges in the report, and kind of that techno optimist, techno pessimist view on kind of where things are headed. Any thoughts on this one, Erin, or should we?
I think we're good. There is a question about use cases, but I'm pretty sure we're going to hit on a bunch of those as we go through this. So,
yeah, I think this was a big one. Erin, do you want to tackle this one?
Yeah. So overhyping, we kind of touched on it in the beginning, where HoloLens, Microsoft coming out with this new device was very exciting. A lot of marketing videos, kind of overblew what the tech was actually capable of. So what we saw, and I think my own experience aligns with this, and my team's as well, we essentially saw these devices on the market, said, okay, this is basically the new future way of coordinating models, any content that needs to be overlaid with something in real life, and got these headsets, and essentially it fell very, very short of what the expectation was. So It took pretty much a specialist to get the models up and running. You needed specialty apps, which many of them at the time of launch were pretty clunky. There wasn't a lot developed for it, especially for the construction industry, since unfortunately we do tend to lag a little bit on the dev side there. And just with the field experience, it was a bigger time waster than a time saver, I'll say, to put it in short terms. So instead of the headset being a natural part of the workflow, you kind of had to battle each step of the way to get it to just show a graphic that you wanted to see. So I think we've come a very long way since that first launch, and tech providers definitely get a bunch of credit here with learning about this process and kind of taking the field first approach and really understanding what problem it is that they're trying to solve with operational teams. So I definitely think that what tech providers are delivering is definitely more level set today. And then just as we mentioned with the Vision Pro, the hardware is also starting to catch up. So those two things together, setting realistic expectations from the tech provider side, as well as the evolution of the hardware, is starting to address this. But it's still very, very important to keep in mind that, technology is not perfect. It doesn't always need to be perfect to solve your problem, but you do need to have a realistic baseline of what it can do for you and what it can't do for you.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think the big part here is the marketing. Honestly, if you're going to point a finger, I think it was the marketing that was done. Not going to name names. Big tech provider put out some pretty misleading marketing early on, and I use the term lightly, but it was pretty boneheaded, and it set a lot of expectations very high. And I give a ton of credit to the early tech providers on the hardware side and the software side. I mean, they were out there and they were just like pioneering and trying to get stuff built for the industry. And it wasn't perfect because no technology is initially. But there was just this huge chasm between expectations set by marketing and where the technology actually was. And it just led to disappointment for the entire product class for the next 10 years. And so I think there's a really good lesson here, not just for AR, but for construction technology in general.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies do that, and it's a pro and a con, right? The pro of even overhyping marketing material, of showing like this is what we envision the future of it to be able to do, right, is like one aspect of showing the future. But at the same time, if it's not capable to do it yet, making sure that that's clear of like, okay, this is where we want to see it go. But if you purchase it today, what can you actually expect to go out and implement, and how's it really going to help you in your business? Those are kind of two different things. But I think it is nice to continue to push that idea of where it can be, that it might get to the point of being seamless, and that we may have a headset on every site, but making sure that it's clear current capabilities versus future vision.
This honestly leads into the next point. And Erin touched on it. Erin, do you want to tackle this one?
Spoiler alert. Yeah, so expanding on first-time user experience, this basically makes or breaks your adoption cycle in your organization. So let's say you take out your headset, the team has a great time, they're able to get value within just a couple minutes of being in the tool. They are off into the races. They basically have something that gave them a really positive experience. They're going to talk about that with their friends, and they're probably going to want to bring that tool that's driving value for them to their next project. So the opportunity there is immense from that first-time usage. On the flip side, so if you bring out the headset and you've got a bunch of people standing around and something's not loading. Oh, the Wi-Fi is not working. Oh, we have to go to a different spot. Oh, let me download this stuff offline and then come back out. Oh, oops, it's not charged. Pile all those things up. It just creates frustration, a really negative takeaway in general, bad feelings towards technology, that's going to be very, very damaging in general, just to the culture that's out in the field when it comes to innovation. So I emphasize this a lot because it is basically the tipping point, if you will, between being able to spread and socialize innovation on your project versus having it shrink and just be allocated to one specialty team. So
I'd love to throw in here, or even just pose to you guys. You guys came from innovation teams in large companies, and that's one of the things I think when we look at new technologies and innovation in general, for all the devices, from the scanners to the drones to the AR to the VR is that some of the technologies get to the point that it is a great tool, it's ready to be used, but things like this get overlooked as far as how you integrate it, because even if the tool is amazing, if the actual teams don't adopt it, or there's too many roadblocks and they're not willing to put it into their workflow, most organizations aren't going to force, hey, every construction site is going to integrate this. It's kind of up to the teams of the people on the site having to want to adopt. And so you're balancing the technology and the culture
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So I think, one thing that we talk about in the report was this conversation we had with one of these technology champions in the field. He was a foreman, and, he kind of nonchalantly mentioned the fact that it takes 5 times for someone with the headset to really be comfortable using the headset on their own. I mean, 5 times. Can you imagine it taking you 5 times to use an iPhone? You would just be done with it. And that's a consumer device. On a construction site, there's so much pressure for time. And, if it takes more than a minute to figure something out, the guy's moved on to the next task because he's just crunched for time. I mean, I think construction, to your point, Matt, is a challenging industry because it's what you're referring to is it's project based. So people are constantly moving and the projects are kind of their own kind of P&L. It's also challenging from a first time user experience because it's hard to get onto job sites, right? Most tech providers and most other industries have the luxury of just Apple could just call me and be like, hey, how's your iPhone going? You can't just walk onto a job site and be like, hey, how's your headset going? Right? There's a whole process to get on site, onboarded and whatnot. So my advice for the builders in the audience is, as much as possible, get the technology provider out on site talking to the people using the tech and kind of clear the path for them, right? So get them all the PPE they need, get them the sign-offs they need, get, chaperone them onto site, let them actually see how people are using their tools. And from the technology provider side, insist on it. You need to actually go out onto a job site and not just build tools for, specialized silos within the organization. Go out in the field and actually figure out how people are using this stuff.
My rule of thumb is if you can't get value out of, about 3 to 5 clicks or so, or just a few minutes, probably going to be a no-go. Yeah. And there's, this is a good segue. But there's a question in the chat if we looked into XYZ. So yes, we did try to get to speak with them, but I think what ended up, we spoke with maybe contractors that were familiar with the XYZ solution. And I think what we got out of that is that it was a bit more of a service. So there are definitely providers like XYZ that basically come out to the job site and bring the full service, kind of white glove. They do it all for you, potentially. So there are different levels of support and involvement for sure.
Yeah. And honestly, the timely question, I mean, the aftermarket provider piece is really important too, because if I'm familiar with XYZ's technology, is actually their localization uses some type of sensors in the environment to localize the headset. That's one way of solving that challenge. And there's a bunch of other challenges. Another big challenge we heard a lot was you can't use it out in sunlight. Well, why can't some innovative, crafty company come up with some type of visor or something that helps address that issue? Similarly, we have the XR10 here on the screen. I mean, one of the big things Microsoft kind of missed, they had all this marketing material for construction, but didn't have HoloLens that connected to a hard hat. So they had to team up with Trimble and they had to it took a year or two to kind of figure that out. So stuff like this, I think, is much more needed in this space. Erin, you talk a lot about fashion, things like just making sure it looks right in the job site environment, right?
Yeah, the fashion anecdote. So and this exact same headset that you see on the screen here, was running a pilot, brought it out to the team, and some of the, I'll say, tenured superintendents were like, no way am I walking around with that thing on my head. And we had our new project engineers, the first year career starts being like, I would love to walk around with this thing on my head. So I think there's definitely a bit of a split when it comes to looking a certain way, or giving off an impression. So I think that's definitely changing, though, as time progresses.
Yeah. Well, one other note I'd throw out, talking about that fact, right? Like initially there was no hard hat integration or something. I also think that's why it's so important to have, the technology providers and the industry professionals collaborate early when we're looking at developing tools, integrating technologies, is that, some of the technology providers, and again, this goes across all the different technologies we talk about, some of them are so focused on the technology, they may not have the expertise of in industry to say, here's something else you might think about, which is why it's great to take background of coming from that industry and bring it into research and feedback. And, because I believe as a community, the more of this type of stuff we do of research and industry integration, we can actually affect the direction that some of the manufacturers go with things that they develop by continuing to give that feedback.
Absolutely. And where they don't, and there's a number of reasons they wouldn't, right? Maybe construction's too small of a market, maybe it's too complicated. It creates a niche for these aftermarket providers to kind of fill that gap.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, a really important piece here, the last couple items are maybe not as much on the technology or even kind of the user side of things. It's more on just general ideas around the use of this technology from more of kind of a social perspective and like an industry-wide perspective. I think folks can very easily see how a technology or a tool like augmented mixed reality creates an environment where more people are able to engage with the project, either because they're in a wheelchair and they're not able to do what you get onto the site, or because they're 2,000 miles away and it's not really worth the cost of jumping on the plane, but they can jump into an augmented environment and like kind of walk someone through a task. So it just kind of opens the door to include a lot more people into the process and allow people into the process in a way that, potentially they're able to thrive and shine.
Yeah. I'll also expand a little bit on the social piece here. I loved hearing all of the stories come back from all of the end users and all sorts of different roles too that were involved with using some of these augmented and mixed reality solutions, because when you're, not a super tech savvy person, but you need to get something built, you're an owner or a developer, you're making critical decisions for your project, it's going to be a little more difficult to understand something that's on a 2D sheet instead of something that's literally in front of your face that you can see and somewhat interact with. So the social component of collaboration and building community around the 3D model and the project itself really accelerates the teamwork and the culture that's on the job site, and creates a closer level of coordination, because now you all don't have to question what you're envisioning. Like, you can literally see all the same thing in front of you. So that makes it, far more humanistic and much more simplified, especially for very sophisticated scopes of work where it might take, a couple weeks of studying drawings to get a handle on it. Now you can pop yourself in a headset, see what's there, and then you're off into the races. So,
and one more thing there is and this I think was mentioned in a comment a little while ago, but it even the difference of who has been in this role for the last 20 years and who is our new workforce that is starting to come into these roles, and do they have the history and the background of knowing how to take a bunch of complex drawings and completely, have that experience to, get in and dissect drawings that easily? Or are they coming into these roles coming from a generation now that has iPhones in their pockets and their gaming environments? And so naturally, I think that this is the progression of how do we gamify different aspects of job sites and of these roles in a way that, there you go.
Yeah.
And the next
presenting our next slide for it. That's
sorry about that. Yeah.
No,
it's just a great transition into that conversation.
Yeah. No, that's 100% it. I've been on jobs where it's just like, here's a stack of civil drawings and there's like 50 drawings and you got to just like, you spend a week, you're new to the project, going through all the drawings and just figuring out what the heck's going on with the scope. Whereas this technology, you're able to just like put it on and you can immediately see. And this was actually one of the builders that we spotlighted. This was literally one of the applications or use cases they had. But no, to your point, Matt, like there's a whole generation of folks. I would say that we're probably on the upper end of that generation, but there's a whole slew of folks who grew up using these intuitively, and that's what they know. And it's not a big deal. And they want to see this stuff, right? Maybe they're not as interested in like kicking the dirt and like rattling bolts, but they're happy to like throw on a headset and like, add value in different areas kind of thing, right?
What struck me from a lot of the users that we spoke to, they had been exposed to not just construction, but the technology side very early on in their educational environments. And I think back myself when I was in middle school, being able to take metal shop and wood shop. And, I'll throw in there, we started to have computer classes.
No VR classes yet?
Not quite VR, but I think schools today are starting to see the value in these. And I hope that it continues to grow and inspire because we're at a point in the industry where we're all experiencing the labor shortage. There are definitely ways that we need to be more efficient out on the job site. And we need to find a way to essentially make construction very cool and get people excited about it. And technology is definitely one of the go-to ways to do so. So connecting the dots, especially for the young, bright minds that are coming up, is going to be transformative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the technology is a big driver for construction. And at the same time, I also throw out, not to push people away from construction, because we're in the built environment, we're all trying to talk about this, but all of these technologies also apply to so many other industries, and all industries are trying to figure out how do we adopt them, what software is available, what are the processes. So, all of these different tools that are really just a tool, right? A scanner, a drone, a VR, an AR headset, they're all just a tool. But what they're creating is a complete career path and industries that need people that become experts in those tools that really have not been a career before. It's just been, hey, a surveyor uses a scanner, a construction engineer uses a headset. As the volume and the adoption of these things grow, there's roles for people that their job will be implementation of these, software integration, designing models that go into them, learning how to capture better. So it really is a whole career path in and of itself.
Absolutely. And I've experienced it, kind of firsthand myself as well, being like, hey, we could do technology. And now there's more careers specifically in construction tech. So it's an exciting time. So with using something like the Trimble XR10 or whatever is your favorite device, could be iPad, iPhone, what have you, the biggest use case that we saw consistently come up from what I saw was basically doing quick verification checks. So QA/QC for sure. And it essentially, according to some of the superintendents that we spoke with, it's an indicator of when to pull tape. So you can put yourself very quickly in the headset, get a good check if things are in line. You'll notice it pretty much right away if something is not in the right spot compared to where it should be in the model. And that's where you, as a superintendent, a project manager, field engineer, to pull out something that's, definitely going to give you a straight measurement, pull your measuring tape, see exactly where things are at, and then be able to say, hey, subcontractor so-and-so, we need to move this here or there, or whatever the case may be. So that is a huge, huge use case. I think another one that fits very well is also just very complex scopes of work where you have different geometries, It's hard to understand exactly what's going into a space, especially for renovation work. So I've been on like 3 historical renovation projects. I really wish we had an AR/MR solution at the time because, wow, it is really hard to say, picture this going through this wall instead of just seeing it. So those are some that are top of mind with the use cases. With use cases as well, there's so many out there. It's really as creative as your team is with applying the technology. So it's almost limitless with how you can apply it in the fields. And I see you're about to say something, Nate.
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing I would say is like, I feel like with use cases, we were like very focused on a lot of general contractor use cases because those are the conversations we had. And so a lot of it revolved around building information models. But I just saw so many opportunities for like across the value chain with like suppliers in the construction industry. Like, how awesome would it be? And we kind of paint a vision of the future in the report, and we tell the story of an electrician. But like, you get a termination kit on the job site, and that supplier, you like scan something on it, and it like walks you through the specifications of the cable, how to make the connection, like what tools you need for the job. Like, there's so many applications beyond just BIM that I think this technology is going to be really useful for. And it's, to Erin's point, really up to the imagination to figure those out. But it's transformative once you really think through. Imagine a job site where everyone has, it's not going to look like this in 10 years. They'll just be like glasses. They'll be like safety glasses. Everyone's got their AR safety glasses on, and all the things they'll be able to do, not just interacting with the building information model, but so much more.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think there's a lot of use case, and I'm sure people are probably curious. I don't know if you want to explain a little bit more, or, I might even say, I don't know if you want to show a little bit, but would you give them a little bit more of, obviously today's discussion has been very high level of like, why are we looking at AR, VR? How is it getting integrated into a job site? Some of the things to consider or challenges, or, but when you look at the report and actual, what all you dive into deeper, obviously 40 pages of content, what else can they expect to kind of get out of that report?
It's soup to nuts. Like we go through the entire history of the technology. I think a really important, and maybe one of my favorite sections, is the first section where we just kind of intro the technology, because there's so much there. There's like such a robust history of using this tool in construction. And there were some early pioneers, like much earlier than you would imagine, using tools that were similar to augmented reality and mixed reality in construction. And we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about just the applications and the uses. So we reference, what we would see as some of maybe the missteps early on in terms of applications. One big takeaway was that we think that the headset wasn't necessarily the first hardware device that needed to be using AR and MR. Like, we tell the story of what's Saeed's startup, Visual Live.
Visual Live, yeah.
Yeah, we tell the story of Visual Live, and like one of the takeaways, and we talk about it in the report, is that by the end of Visual Live, by the time they got acquired by Unity, like their mobile device users outnumbered their headset users like 5-1, right?
Yeah.
And it just goes to show people are familiar with this. And I think a lot of technology providers are pivoting to this. Like they're not ditching the headsets necessarily, but they're making sure that they have an application that's device friendly. Yeah. Because that's what folks in the field need. And just to kind of round it out here in terms of the report, I mean, it's 40 plus pages long, so we can't, an hour doesn't do justice. But
there's a lot.
But there's a lot in there. And I think one of the most important things we talk about is in the outlooks and opportunities section, just understanding how builders view the technology and how tech providers view the technology. And there's this awesome chart, and I should have thrown it on these slides, but there's this awesome chart where we break down their rankings of what the biggest barrier to adoption is in the industry. And there's a disconnect between the provider and the builder. And so we highlight that and we say, the builder thinks this is the reason the technology hasn't taken off, and the tech provider thinks this is the reason the technology hasn't taken. So it's just really interesting. And there's like a dozen of those kind of like interesting nuggets of information and takeaways in the report.
Yeah. And again, like you said, I think that report is in depth enough. It's hard to summarize in a in a webinar, but I hope this gave enough of an overview to give you guys some idea that are listening, what you can expect from kind of diving in deeper. There's a lot ahead, I think, for AR, VR on the job site. And, you know, it's hard to find this type of information. It takes a lot of research if you want to do it yourself, I think, which is why people are interested in it, because it really, finding people who are creating information like this helps fast forward the process for somebody who is interested. You're skipping a lot of that research time by just getting in and digging into the report that you guys have created, which, again, excited to share that out with the community, as well as if you guys want to meet these wonderful people in person, then you can come out to the conference in Boise next month. It's coming up quick. Erin will be doing a presentation. B&B Builders will be also doing a presentation just after her, which was part of this report as well, actually showing their project of AR on the job site and using it in a project, as well as many other presentations that'll be diving into new technologies. So, and I'm sure, Nate and Erin, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys would welcome people to reach out to you directly, maybe LinkedIn, and we'll also make sure we have your contact information available. But if you guys have questions as you dive in or consider these tools, they would be great resources for you.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. So feel free, type my name into LinkedIn. I should pop up. Feel free to connect. I'll also drop my email in the chat if anybody would like to follow up after this. So very, very happy to talk about construction tech.
Yeah, thanks for hosting us, Matt. This is great. I think RCN is doing awesome work bringing people together and driving the industry forward. And we hope folks out of the industry find value in this, because it's something I know I would have found value in back in the day when we were doing a lot of the same things.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, and that's our goal, is that we create a platform that we can share this type of information. I've always said, like, you know, us in our own companies and you guys in your previous roles, right? You probably did your own pilot projects and your own case studies and your own reports, but it was for internal use. And then there's hundreds of other companies that are like, dang, I wish I knew what you learned from your, you know, your testing, your research. And I feel like that if we come together as a community and we're willing to start sharing some of this information, that we can actually improve the entire industry's adoption of new technologies and help create guidelines of best practices and help people select the right tools, because those are all challenges. And there's challenges with innovation. There's struggles building out departments and certain size businesses too. They don't have whole divisions working on innovation, you know, R&D, right? And so for smaller businesses and mid-sized firms, they need support like this. They need someone to come to them and say, hey, you're a survey company, you're an engineering company, you're an architect. Here are some ways that other, you know, firms are integrating these tools. These are the benefits. And so information like this, I think, is critical for the future of innovation in the built environment.